find where I was eventually.
Paul knows all these people.
On the right-hand side,
You need to
just
put it
passing
right, you
the
need to
Tower
put it
of
right next to the
London.
glass, or
Over
it's
the
going
last
to
900
ruin
years,
your
this tower has been a royal palace, the Royal Mint, an armoury, observatory,
If it touches the glass, it'll be much better.
and home to the crown jewels.
Try actually touching the glass. Suddenly you've got a good picture.
Where they're brought
They
down
are.
river and taken into
I
the
told you I
tower
was
to
a
be
photographer, didn't
imprisoned
I?
or executed.
I have no
One of the
idea.
most famous people to be sent to the tower was a young red-headed princess called Elizabeth. Now she was sent to the tower by her sister Queen Mary. As she was freed around 6 months later, she went on to become Queen Elizabeth I. On our left ahead of us we have Hms Belfast. She was built in the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, same shipyard as the ill-fated Titanic. Now she saw action during the Second World War, and she last fired guns in anger during the Korean campaign.
I doubt it.
She's now part of the Imperial War Museum. You can explore 9 decks of the Belfast
most pubs do have
all the way up to the
but that pub
Captain's
didn't.
Bridge. Well, the area on the
whether he's got
left
any.
from the Tower Bridge to London Bridge is London Bridge City, and it's a self-contained city. They have their own police force, they have their own fire brigade, and they even have their own hospital. Now surprisingly, London Bridge City is owned and financed by that great British institution, the Royal Kuwaiti family. They've also opened a rather large Christmas market over here, where it's a lovely place to have a look around if you have the time. But ahead of us on the right there's a sandy coloured building with gold fish for weather vanes, and that's the old Billingsgate Fish Market. Now there was a fish market on this site for over 900 years. It's now moved to larger premises in the Docklands area, but it's still famous for its fresh fish and the foul language from its porters. A young man called Maurice Micklewhite started his career there, and he later went on to become the famous Cockney actor, Michael Caine. A lot of people say Billingsgate is where he learned how to swear properly. Not many people know that. But the bridge ahead of us, this is London Bridge, and it's the 5th bridge to span the river on this side. The first one was a wooden bridge built by the Romans over 2,000 years ago. Now this bridge was opened by the Queen in 1973, and it replaced the last bridge which was found to be falling down. Now we did the only thing we could think of. We boxed it up stone by stone and sold it to an American company for £2 million. It now spans a man-made Lake Havasu in the Arizona desert. Now this bridge is the first of 8 bridges which have been relit as part of the Illuminated River project. So an American artist called Leo Villarreal has created new lighting schemes for 8 of our bridges. This is the first, and I'll try and explain a little bit of each on the journey upriver. That's where I'm most likely to make a mistake, so I haven't done this very often in about 2 years. But the lighting on this particular bridge is supposed to pulsate to represent the fast traffic which passes over what was essentially the first major river crossing over the tidal Thames. And before London Bridge was built, the only other bridge on the river was possibly as far upriver as Kingston, maybe a bit further, I can't quite remember. The next bridge here is Canon Street Railway Bridge. Now this is arguably the oldest and the ugliest railway bridge in central London. It was designed by John Hawkshaw and opened in 1866. Now this bridge is being lit for the first time in its life, and the lighting is supposed to simulate the passenger trains that pass overhead. So if you look at each span is lit to look like the windows on each carriage, and the buttresses remain dark like the gaps between each carriage. It's very simple, but it's also quite effective. Off to our left now there's a grey building called Winchester Walls. Now that stands on the site of the old Palace of Winchester, and that was the London residence of the Bishop of Winchester. That is where you'd find his own personal prison, the Clink. That was a prison for debtors and heretics. Through this bridge and off to our left we've got a very historic riverside pub, nicely illuminated, and this is the Anchor backside. Now there's been a pub over on the left here for over 400 years, and it is said that William Shakespeare had a changing room in the Anchor for when he was performing.
I'm afraid there's no mulled wine, but we'll get some in the pub, I'm sure.
It's also said that Samuel Pepys, the diarist, sat in the Anchor and wrote his diaries while the great fire burned on the opposite shore. The bridge ahead of us here, this is Southwark Road Bridge. Now this was opened by King George V in 1921. It's the narrowest and least used road bridge to cross the Thames in central London. And that's because the approach roads are so narrow and so poorly signed, not many Londoners know this bridge is here. And the lighting on this one pays tribute to Impressionist artists who painted the bridge, including Claude Monet and a few others as well. Southwark's a very popular subject in a lot of Impressionist paintings.
Yes, indeed it is.
On the right, we're just passing this building with 4 columns. That is Vintner's Place. Used to be home to the Honourable Company of Vintners. They have the undesirable job of testing all the beers, wines and spirits which are brought into this country. There's about a 10-year waiting list for a job there. I know that because I've been waiting 5, I'm about halfway there. Off to our left is a white building with timber frames and a thatched roof. That is a replica of Shakespeare's Globe. And that was the idea of Sam Wine.
You know about Shakespeare's Globe?
Film producer and director.
My father, when he was a school teacher, he made a large working model of the globe long before this replica was built, so that his pupils could see it. I mean, I don't know what's happened to it now, but you could open it out, and it was beautifully made. It's a shame. I don't know what happened
also on
to
the
it.
left is the old Bankside
I've seen
Power
my brother
Station.
knows, 'cause
That was designed by Giles Gilbert Scott.
I have been to one or two places in there. It gives you a feeling of what it must have been like in Shakespeare's day.
Bankside closed due to the escalating price of oil, and it's now
Have you been in
home
Tate
to
Modern
Tate
yet?
Modern, the largest collection of modern art in the world.
The only trouble is there's very little
We're just
daylight
passing
in
through the
there,
Millennium
which is a
Bridge.
shame.
It's more commonly called the Wibbly Wobbly Bridge. And that's
There you
because it was
are,
opened
Wibbly
by the
Wobbly
Queen in
Bridge.
the Millennium year and closed by the police the following day because it wobbled quite violently. That bridge was closed for 2 years. They spent millions of pounds dewobblising it.
Dewobblising it.
The light on that bridge is supposed to pulsate and flash.
No, it was fascinating how all the engineers didn't manage to predict what would happen when people actually walked on it. You know how when soldiers go on a bridge they have to break step? It was a similar kind of thing. The momentum would just gradually build up, and it was sort of waving like this. It was amazing. I mean, you know, I didn't fall over, but if you had bad balance, which I didn't, my balance has been affected by my stroke. Actually, I still haven't fallen over since my stroke. You know, I used to have particularly good balance, and I used to get away with things as a skier just because I had good balance. You know, I don't have
But
good
the bridge
technique.
ahead of us here, this is Blackfriars Railway Bridge. Now, it was built by Henry Mark Brunel, son of Isambard Kingdom Brunel.
It's now got a station on it. That's a railway station on the bridge.
And Dover Railway. That bridge was taken down because it couldn't take the weight of the modern
But you can see,
trains.
the columns.
As we pass under this bridge,
Of
you
the
can see the
original
red
bridge.
columns on
There
the
they are,
inside
I
of
see.
us. That is all that remains of the old bridge. Now, the railway bridge hasn't been illuminated yet, but during the London Olympics, they did widen the bridge onto the foundations of the original, and that was so they could put the Blackfriars station on top. The station now spans the width of the River Thames, with the largest solar-powered roof in Europe as well. So on a sunny day here in London, trains actually run on time. You can only imagine what the service is like tonight. This next bridge is Blackfriars Road Bridge. It was built at the bequest of Queen Victoria to commemorate the Dominican monastery that stood over on the right. The monks wore black habits. It's where we get the name Blackfriars. Now the lighting on this bridge is supposed to complement the architectural style of all the intricate lattice work. People often pass over or under the bridges without appreciating all the beauty in the work that actually goes into their design. By our right, we've got a Gothic building, beautifully illuminated, and that is the old City of London School for Boys.
Come out nicely,
And that is where they educated a lot of our former MPs and Prime Ministers. Now, despite that, they do say
I should think that takes better photos than your camera, doesn't it?
2 weeks there, before he was expelled for fighting. On our left here is a large building illuminated in a rainbow. This is Sea Container's House. If I remember correctly, it was built in the 1940s to become a hotel, but the hotel never opened. It's been everything else over the years. And they finally opened a hotel here a few years ago. They actually reclad the building to give it a much more modern and pleasing look. But the building next door to it, the red brick building, this is Stamford Wharf. It's more commonly called the Oxo Tower. Now that used to be a coal store for the famous Oxo company, and when they had it designed, it was illegal to advertise on the Thames unless your company worked with boats. And because Oxo makes stock cubes and have nothing to do with boats, they were taken to court. and they argued it was merely a coincidence that the windows on their towers felt their company.
Just a work of art, isn't it?
Surprisingly, the judge actually agreed with them, and they've had over 90 years of free advertising ever since. I think they've got away.
So we've had the same thing with judges in this country with our activism, you see, that they get what we're doing. And then, you know, there was one time when there was an arms factory near Brighton, some guys went in and destroyed all the computers worth £500,000, and they went to the court, and they were found not guilty. They were found, you know, they accepted the protesters that they were preventing a greater crime. But of course, if this government has its way, you know, and stays in power for much longer, to try and get rid of the independence of the judiciary.
London, where we're about to leave, and the city of Westminster, where we're about to enter. Now, the city of London is the smallest capital city in the world.
The Ferris wheel goes up into the fog.
You'll find silver dragons just like those at every
that.
major entrance to the city of London. They're placed there to protect it from all evil. But I'm not too sure they were. Off to our left, there's a large concrete building illuminated in a bit of an aqua blue today. This is the National Theatre, and that was voted the ugliest building in London for over 10 years. That's until somebody finally built an uglier one in Woolwich. It's actually a Tesco.
It's nice they've got this coloured lighting because it is a hideous 1960s building. Just concrete horror.
And they've opened their winter market and festival, which is well worth a visit. But the bridge ahead of us here, this is Waterloo Bridge, and it's affectionately known as the Ladies' Bridge, and that's because it was built by the Women's Land Army during the Second World War. Now, Waterloo is the longest bridge in central London, just under a quarter of a mile, and it's one of the only bridges in London to be built on time and on budget. So well done to girls. Now, when they turned the lighting on for the first time, I was here for the opening night. I was a bit confused at first. At first I thought it was broken, then I thought it represented budget cuts. I've come to realise it actually illuminated the sweeping curves, but without lighting up the water beneath. Now, one of the biggest challenges with illuminated river is they can't brightly light the bridges because it would disturb the marine life in the river. So they have to do the soft lighting so as not to disturb the fish. And they also turn the bridges off at about 2 or 3 in the morning just so the fish can get some sleep. Sounds funny, but it's actually true. But off to our right now, there's a building with a green roof and a single flag mast, and that is the Savoy Hotel. It's one of our more luxurious bed and breakfasts. Now, the Savoy was opened by Richard Doyle Cart, and it was the first hotel in the world to have electric lighting and electric lifts as well. A bit further along on the right is London's oldest landmark, and that is Cleopatra's Needle. Now, that obelisk originally stood in Heliopolis in Egypt.
Do you know about the history of the Festival Hall?
That was given to us.
It was soon after the war. There was a big thing called celebrating the recovery from the war, called the Festival of Britain in the early 1950s. And this was built then. It was way ahead of its time, and it's actually faced with Portland stone. And you know, it's a far better building than these other halls that have been added in the 60s. Queen Elizabeth Hall and a personal room there, and indeed the National Theatre. And this underwent a big refurbishment about 10 years ago. And it's nothing like what the acoustics of the hall I went to in Birmingham, which was built thanks to Simon Rattle having been there. And Simon Rattle, his most recent appointment is with the London Symphony Orchestra, which is the best orchestra in London. But because of Brexit, he's decided to take a job with the Bavarian Radio Symphony Orchestra, and his family is still in Germany. And he was going to campaign to get a really decent concert hall in London, and probably that won't happen now because he's moving because of Brexit, basically. I don't blame him. It's very sad.
So well done to them. Now, this railway bridge hasn't been illuminated, but they have lit 2 footbridges
up into the clouds.
Ways, and like the Millennium Bridge, it's supposed to pulsate to represent the foot traffic that passes overhead. On our left is London's #1 landmark, and that's the London Eye. Now, the Eye opened in the millennium year and was originally sponsored by British Airways.
Not been up there yet. My mum managed to go up there before she got her dementia.
On a sunny day here in London, the Eye can make up to £16,500 in just half an hour. So I'm not too sure what kind of money they wanted to make, but that clearly wasn't enough. On our right here, we have the grey panel steamer, Tattershall Castle. Now she started her life as a car ferry on the River Humber. She was brought to London to become a floating art gallery. Now she was a gallery for 2 years, and then she was turned into something Londoners love instead.
Do you know what this building is here?
Apparently
It was
she
the
made more money than her
headquarters
first
of
two weeks
the Greater London Council, which got abolished by
Just goes to
Margaret
show you,
Thatcher.
one of
Sort of
artists
looking
we
across
like
to the Houses of
in
Parliament.
Got a
And
few artists on
you
there
know, when
today.
Ken Livingstone was mayor of London, I think. And it's used for other
Now
things
we're now
now.
arriving at Westminster Pier, folks. Now I'm afraid this
It's
boat
not
will be
called
going
County
out
Hall,
to
but you know, you've got a McDonald's on the ground
So
floor
please just
and
take these last few
Sea
moments
Life
to
Museum
make
and
sure
various
you have
things.
all of your personal items and belongings. Don't leave anything behind to spoil your day. Any parents on board, your children are your personal items and belongings.